Theatre in the Quarter are a theatre company from Chester who have done a lot of street theatre around the World War One theme, and they use music to gain interest in a street environment. We commissioned Theatre in the Quarter to develop a piece of street theatre to launch the Preston Remembers City Tours programme. And the City Tours programme is about looking at stories around Preston that tell all different sides of the World War One story in Preston. So we have a conscientious objector, we have a lady that started the free buffet at Preston, and we have a soldier who was a soldier before the war. The actual event was developed to introduce these stories to the people of Preston. So we worked with Theatre in the Quarter to develop a piece of musical theatre that would take those stories out to the streets, let people who were just passing in the street, passing audience into these stories.
What's the use of worrying? It never was worthwhile.
So the three stories that we actually chose to look at, we needed stories that were based around sort of fairly close locations. So we wanted ones that still had surviving buildings that were relevant to the stories, and that also told different aspects of the First World War story. So it wasn't just your traditional Tommy in the trenches. We wanted to look at different things as well. So in the end, the three stories that we very luckily had volunteer researchers to look at, and we found three really strong stories. One was Joseph Garstang, who was a conscientious objector, and actually one of his descendants came to one of our road shows. We asked people to come forward with stories of their relatives in the First World War, and he was a conscientious objector who lived in Preston, and he was an absolutist, which means he refused to do any form of war work, whether that was working in a munitions factory, being in the peace, the ambulance corps. So he ended up actually being imprisoned. He went on hunger strike, and he was force-fed a total of 38 times, and ended the war really a broken man. So he died in the late 1920s, and although you might not say that his death was directly war-related, there's certainly an element that his broken health might have been as a result of the trauma that he endured in the war.
But this war is not normal. This slaughter is not normal.
Joseph Garstang was a great uncle of mine, and mine and my brother's, and this is my sister-in-law that's with me today. We've been doing a couple of projects, one in Lancaster and one in Preston, about Joseph, and this is the culmination of it. We're just really proud that everybody's getting a voice equally. Whether they were conscientious objectors or whatever, they're getting a voice today, and that's proved it today. And the sun came out for us as well.
The second person, we wanted a sort of women's story, and again, fortunately, we found a really strong story with Beatrice Blackhurst, and she was one of the ladies who set up the free buffet at Preston Station to give refreshments to the soldiers and sailors who went through the station. And she was also very active in other things like women and baby health clinics, raising money for various sort of charities and things like that. So she was a really strong campaigner for women's rights. She was also a suffragist, so she also wanted women to get the vote.
We shall offer a welcome all day and all night, every day and every night.
I came across Beatrice Blackhurst in a photograph of the ladies on the buffet committee and decided to have a look to see if I could find out any information about her. And first of all looking in the census to see where she was living, and I discovered from a newspaper article that she'd been involved with the suffragettes and other good causes in the town, and so I looked into that and discovered that she'd actually kept a scrapbook of all the activities she was involved in, which was in the archives at Bow Lane. From that I was able to piece together her story based on the activities she took part in, from marching down to London with the suffragettes to setting up welfare centres in Preston, which was the first county in England to have health visitors, and was able to put together a full story based on her life for one of the historical walks.
And the third one, although we sort of said we didn't want to look at just traditional stories, obviously the story of those soldiers who went off to fight was a very strong story. So we also looked at someone called John Gregson.
We don't fight hand to hand. We just sit in the mud and watch each other.
Before this lark, you were a weaver.
But it wasn't for me, so I joined the colours for a spell of adventure. When my time was up, I had a fine life driving trams. I was still a reservist, mind.
A proper dapper man, a Preston man.
So in 1914, I was called up.
Must you go, John?
I've been a soldier, Catherine. They need men like me out there.
But you've 2 babbies now to consider. Be careful, John.
I will, Catherine.
Till the day that I'll be going down that long, long trail with you.
And he was a soldier, but actually before the war, and then a reservist, so he was called back up and very sadly died in the trenches in France in 1915. And he had a wife and 3 children that he left behind. So we had 3 very different stories, but all the people that we looked at were obviously very strongly impacted by the war.
Who were you with last night? Out in the pale moonlight. Are you gonna tell your missus when you get home who you were with last night?
Mostly, most of the songs that we performed in Preston Remembers piece are songs from the time. So there are songs like Pack Up Your Troubles in Your Old Kit Bag, and There's a Long, Long Trail, and Keep the Home Fires Burning, and they're all songs of that period. Some of them evoke that sense of gung-ho, it'll all be over by Christmas, and they were very much the songs from 1914 really, or written before 1914. Of course, once the horrors of the First World War and this total war became apparent, there were very few songs that were ever written after 1914 which had that same spirit of, off we go, we're going to have a pop at the Bosch and all this sort of stuff. So the songs were very different in nature. That's reflected a little bit in the piece as we get towards the end. Then we've got our own setting of Lawrence Binyon's words, Lawrence Binyon's poem For the Fallen, they shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. So the piece has a bit of an arc. It's all quite confident at the beginning, and then it takes the audience on a bit of a journey. We have the last post, of course, where we raise all our poppies, and finish with For the Fallen at the end.